Bayonetta games, a necessity for gracious living.
Over the last few weeks, this famous franchise has been in the news constantly. This is not surprising when we consider that the long-awaited third entry in the series is about to finally hit shelves. But as is usual with these games, the road to the launch has been heaped with internet drama and controversy. So holding these thoughts in mind to celebrate the release of Bayonetta 3, we will take a trip back through time to look at the making of this brilliant trilogy, along with the many speed bumps that, at times, fans have been absolutely outraged over. So without further ado,
I am Lady Decade, and this is the controversial history of Bayonetta.
To begin today's tale, we have to head back to the naughty decade that was the noughties to see where Bayonetta's genesis started. To understand Bayonetta's birth, we first need to look at the franchise's series director Hideki Kamiya. Going even further than this period, Hideki had already received a great deal of experience in the world of gaming, beginning his career at Capcom in 1994 and going on to direct classics such as Resident Evil 2, Devil May Cry and Beautiful Joe. Hideki had a remarkable track record when it came to directing classic games. By 2004, Hideki would be moved to a Capcom subsidiary known as Clover Studio, where he would direct Okami, another classic game. Although Okami was a critical success and personally one of my favourite games, sadly it failed to live up to Capcom's sales expectations, with Clover Studio's next project, God Hand, selling even worse. Developers at Clover Studio reportedly felt stifled working in such an environment, compounded further by the fact that Capcom's corporate management was becoming increasingly reluctant to greenlight ideas they saw as risky. By 2006, Clover Studio would shut down, leading to Hideki and other employees leaving Capcom altogether.
Sad times.
This was far from the end for Hideki's career in gaming, with the seasoned director co-founding a new company known as Seeds Incorporated. This company would be founded alongside Shinji Mikami, the director of the first Resident Evil and Dino Crisis games, and Atsushi Inaba, a producer who had worked on Beautiful Joe, Devil May Cry, Okami and more. Together, this trio of gentlemen formed an excellent foundation for what was to come. In an old Bayonetta documentary, WitchCraft, Hideki states that the early stages of running this company were not easy, saying, "All of us, our software guys, our designers, etc. had to start from scratch. We were able to get the company to take shape, but we hardly hit the ground running. We had to focus on getting our environment set up properly first. We knew we could start cranking out project proposals as long as we had a working word processor, and that's exactly what we did. Initially, I concentrated on casual games, the kind of games that could be played in the living room and enjoyed by the whole family, from little kids to grandparents. The new cash cow." Although Hideki admits that during this era he feels like he was being led astray by the allure of easy money instead of conceptualising the most fantastic game possible, a dilemma I would imagine the majority of creatives tend to face.
But thankfully for us, Hideki would have a change of heart.
Yasuki Hashimoto, who also worked at the fledgling studio, noticed some of the ideas Hideki was working on and thought they looked bizarrely out of character for him. Hashimoto and Hideki would slowly build a strong rapport with one another, with Hideki Kamiya eventually asking Hashimoto what he thought he should be working on. He would tell Kamiya that he wanted to see another 3D action game like Devil May Cry, the sort of title that helped establish Kamiya's legacy to begin with. Kamiya says he found Hashimoto's response refreshingly raw and genuine. Building on this, Hashimoto states, "I just honestly wanted to see another one of his trademark games, and if I could be part of making it happen, all the better."
This was the conversation that would set the trajectory for the development of Bayonetta.
Before the release of such a title in 2007, Seed Incorporated would merge with Odd Incorporated, owned by Tatsuya Minami, who also worked at Capcom before founding his own studio, working on franchises such as Mega Man and Super Ghouls and Ghosts in the past. After the merger, they would begin operating under Platinum Games, with the brand new studio partnering up with Sega as part of a 4-title deal as of May 2008. These games would include Mad World, an ultra-violent title produced for the Nintendo Wii, Infinite Space, Vanquish, an action third-person shooter, and last but certainly not least, Bayonetta. Under the directorial leadership of Kamiya, when it comes to conceptualising the character, he states that "We wanted to bring a new flavour into the market, and I knew a female lead would accomplish exactly that. It was clear to us that mixing a sexy and amorous female character with an action game setting would produce a masterful spice blend." Hashimoto, who would ultimately end up serving as the game's producer, added to this. "I guess you could say male characters have been overdone in this genre, so I certainly found the notion of introducing a female lead to be intriguing." Kamiya continues, "We wanted to give this game an intricate yet raw kind of action that you simply can't get with human-on-human combat. Using the concept of witches and their magical abilities as our conduit allowed us to make this style of play believable, not to mention the natural fascination that dark pacts and the like instill in us, or me at least."
But of course, this was just the start of the brilliant ideas that would set the groundwork for this game.
Mari Shimazaki, who would work as an artist on the game, would design the title's characters to be fashionable, yet have subdued features. As for Bayonetta herself, she would fulfill Kamiya's request for her to be a modern female witch that wears glasses and wields 4 guns. Reflecting on all of this, Kamiya has stated in the past, "I hadn't actually considered the idea of giving the main character her own distinct style of weapon. I was more focused on trying to figure out how to make the traditional pre-existing weapons unique." This would all change as time progressed, with Hidetoshi Kai, a man who worked on the game as its motion designer, talking further about how the 4-gun idea came to life. He mentions that, "I started out with the idea that we would arm her with a handgun. The plan was for her to physically strike her enemy with the weapon itself, then follow that attack by actually firing her gun at the target." Kamiya also brings up that for the PS2 version of Beautiful Joe they had made previously, they had added Dante from Devil May Cry as an extra playable character. He has a new action separate from Joe, where he can strike an enemy with his gun in a punching motion before firing it. Speaking with Kai, the pair would decide to expand on this idea with Bayonetta.
But the question was how?
Being a man of culture, Kai would draw the conclusion that a focus should be placed on Bayonetta's sexy legs, stating, "Kicks could certainly be delivered with grace by a female character, and I thought having a gun attached to her foot to deliver additional damage after a kick might be fun," which is how many of Bayonetta's now iconic melee attacks were born. Kamiya adds, "This idea single-handedly expanded the window of character customization exponentially, allowing them to explore a much wider pool of weapon styles, defining Bayonetta as a character with a unique fighting style forever." Building on trivia surrounding this weaponry, as a fan of folk music, Kamiya named Bayonetta's 4 handguns after the Old English ballad Scarborough Fair, and its individual guns parsley, sage, rosemary and thyme. In the first game, Bayonetta emerges as a long-haired, black-clothed witch with a beehive hairdo and glasses, which Kamiya pushed for to differentiate Bayonetta from other female characters and to give her a sense of mystery and intelligence. To this, Kamiya brings up that he felt the glasses give Bayonetta an extra air of authority, like a schoolteacher, but jokes that such a thought track is likely his own twisted worldview.
So, with solid reasoning behind her glasses, what about her hairdo?
During the game's development, the team began to notice that the fact she wore all black and had long flowing black hair was causing visual issues on screen. This would not only make it tough to see her when she was traversing a dark area, but her hair covering everything would make her actions obscured behind a wall of hair. Regarding this, Mari Shimazaki mentions, "It was difficult to see what you needed in order to defend effectively. This obviously is a fatal flaw for an action game." Shimazaki comments that to solve the problem they would experiment by trying to make her a blonde or a redhead. Still, by changing her hair colour, the character no longer projected the image they were happy with. In fact, discussions over her hair got so intense it would become a severe point of contention amongst the team. Reportedly, through this period, her design would stray further and further from what was initially intended. So Kamiya eventually decided that the team needed to go back to the original design he had picked and work off of just that to solve the issue. Kamiya comments that when it came to her hair, it would be decided, once we had our focus back on the first design, we knew we still had to solve the hair problem. Bayonetta is a witch, and witches have all kinds of wonderful powers. What if she wasn't wearing any clothes at all, but instead magically had her hair enshrouding her entire body in the form of clothes? We put the theory to the test and it worked. That was the moment when the design that became the basis for Bayonetta's final design took shape. Building on this design, since players would be looking at her from behind for the majority of a playthrough, Shimazaki came up with the idea of adding a massive opening on the back of her clothing, with Hashimoto commenting in the past that players can become enthralled by this feature of her design.
Hypnotic.
Of course, though Bayonetta was not the only entity designed for this game, it was soon chosen that she would be fighting against angels because she was a witch. The angels were created by Hashimoto, stating that when it comes to designing a devil character, most people have an idea of what to expect, but when you're told that angels are the enemy, you really don't know what to expect. My thinking was that angels should look divine, but action game enemies should have a fiendish or unsettling visual flavour. I gave them claws and fangs because if it doesn't look like it can kill you, it won't work as an action game enemy. As for the game's story, it would be decided to take place somewhere in Europe, but Kamiya commented he didn't want the team to paste a European style into the game. Basically, he wanted the title to feel European while not feeling like any place on Earth. The background concept art would be designed by Ikumi Nakamura, credited by Hashimoto for being very meticulous about the small details of Bayonetta's world. Joining the team later into the game's development, Nakamura would choose to grab a solid grasp of the game's themes to visualise a world to craft around them. She has stated in the past that, for architectural styles I drew on Italian architecture and the like, but I also took into consideration the fact that the sages lived there. The sages' motif is the sun, so I wanted to incorporate that into the actual buildings, the windows and some of the more ceremonial detailing. Nakamura would also help create the items found in Bayonetta's world. She states that, as for the items, I imagined the ancient witches and what sort of items they have used. That's why you see things like mandragora roots, blood and hearts. The base components are familiar, but then I added a fantasy twist to their design. These items helped add more depth and breadth to Bayonetta's world, while the art direction was critical in all of this. At its heart, Bayonetta is an action game.
So let's discuss what went into creating some of Bayonetta's fantastic attacks.
Kamiya wanted Bayonetta to have an arsenal of elegant moves to suit her image. To make her full gun attacks look as impressive as possible, he would recruit a team of professionals who could perform graceful flips and rolls, and one who performed her iconic climax dances. The quality, detail and finesse of her movements were things he admits that he was not willing to skimp out on. As for the dancing side of things, 8 different performers were invited to the audition. As for these auditions, one in attendance was not only late, but she didn't even bother to listen to the sample track they had previously provided her to conceptualise a dance. The team were disappointed by this, to say the least. In a remarkable twist though, listening to the music there and then during the audition, this performer would blow the Bayonetta team away with her moves. The dancer Maiko Uchida was incredible and wiped the floor with every other applicant. Kamiya states, It was unanimous. We knew we had found our girl. It was like seeing a real live Bayonetta. As for being late, Maiko states it was due to running late from another job, but she nonetheless enthralled the angry men who watched her dance that evening. Maiko's dancing would be motion captured for the game, and the rest is history. Kamiya was so impressed with her work that nothing was left unused.
What a story.
As for the further action in the game, Yuji Shimomura was drafted into the project, a man with a wealth of experience producing action-related CG work, who would become the game's cinematics director. While working on Devil May Cry 4, Kamiya approached him about Bayonetta, with Kamiya believing it was the allure of working with a female main character that was possibly intriguing enough for him to come on board. Kamiya thought he had finally formed a dream team by adding him to his staff. Yuji Shimomura was able to expand fights into intensely dynamic battles. Yuji adds, "As I pieced the cinematics together, I sometimes got carried away and did parts that I wasn't specifically told to do." With Kamiya commenting that he would take scenes he had put together and create new video storyboards, improving scenes. Shimomura would also bring more actors on board to act out certain scenes from the game to get the storyboards to life, which would then be replicated and inserted into the game. As for the game's music, the title's lead composer was Hiroshi Yamaguchi, who was under instruction to create melodies with a feminine sound to them. Kamiya would suggest that Yamaguchi try working with Spanish music, which Yamaguchi would decide to combine with jazz. Yamaguchi believes that they would end up creating a unique sound that is distinctly Bayonetta. With Bayonetta being a somewhat collaborative effort alongside Sega, Kamiya would also seek to include classic Sega music as a reference to the brand's storied history. To do this, he would need to liaise with Hiro from Sega. He allowed them to use music from Afterburner, Outrun, Space Harrier, and eventually Fantasy Zone. Platinum Games would even manage to convince Sega to make new arrangements of the music for the Bayonetta game for them, making the Sega music as authentic as possible. Despite these excellent features, Sega and Platinum Games still had a massive hurdle.
And that would be how to gain interest and eyes on a brand new IP.
Game designer Hiroshi Shibata was very aware of this and knew that when readers flipped through magazines or browsed the internet, the visuals had to make people stop and pay attention. Compelling visuals would therefore be an absolute necessity. According to Kamiya, this way of thinking was the driving force behind the creation of Bayonetta's climax actions. Eventually, the idea was conceived that Bayonetta could fight on debris as it was falling, which led to the creation of the incredible clock tower scene near the beginning of the game. Torture attacks would also be introduced to emphasise Bayonetta's sadism and the fact that witches are more than familiar with torture given their history of being persecuted. Using torture devices against angels offered up a sort of ironic revenge. As part of her climax attacks, since Bayonetta often fights against divine beasts in the game, intensely vicious allies can be summoned to counter these frightening foes. With these attacks, Bayonetta's hair acts as a conduit. To quote Hashimoto, "The whole thing is very cool."
So after 3 years and with all that effort put into the game, what would be next?
On the 29th of October 2009, Bayonetta was finally released to the world. The game would receive promotion at E3 of that year and additional promotion from Sega. Sega ran an audition involving 100 women, where they would choose Penny Drake to model the character. Furthermore, they would run a competition on Maxim.com looking for a Bayonetta lookalike, with the winner receiving an Xbox 360, 50-inch plasma screen TV, and a copy of the game. On the Japanese side, they would hire pop singer Michi to perform the track Something Missing to be used in the Bayonetta commercial. The ad features a model dressed as Bayonetta sucking her trademark lollipop. As you will probably be aware, bearing in mind how highly regarded the game is today, Bayonetta would be critically lauded by gamers and the media, with comparisons often drawn to Devil May Cry. Before Bayonetta's release, Japanese gaming publication Famitsu awarded the Xbox 360 version a perfect 40 out of 40. A classic game had instantly been born. Earlier in the video I did mention that we would be talking about controversies. Unfortunately, there have been dramas surrounding this game beyond debates over Bayonetta's in-game hairstyle. These go back to this game's launch and the PlayStation 3 version. Essentially, the Xbox 360 Bayonetta was the only version out of the two that was worth players' time back in the day. The game on the PlayStation 3 was not even close to as good as what could be found on the 360.
Which raises the question, why?
Well, if you happen to be unfortunate enough to own Bayonetta for the PlayStation 3, you would be met with an experience that features more washed out colours, a choppier frame rate, lengthy load times, and more control issues than if you played the game on the 360. In fact, Platinum Games have gone as far to comment that the PS3 version of Bayonetta was the studio's most significant failure of all time. In an interview with Edge magazine, Atsushi Inaba stated the problem lies in the fact that Platinum Games never handled the conversion themselves and instead outsourced the task to Sega to perform.
But come on, Sega ballsing something up! Who would have thought?
Inaba commented, "At the time, we didn't really know how to develop on PS3 all that well, and whether we could have done it is irrelevant. We made the decision that we couldn't. But looking back on the result, and especially what ended up being released to users, I regard that as our biggest failure. One thing I will say is that it wasn't a failure for nothing. We learned, so it wasn't a pointless failure, but it was a failure nonetheless. We learned that we needed to take responsibility for everything. So on Vanquish we developed both versions in-house. Regardless of this mistake, Bayonetta would quickly garner a large fan base who would soon begin to love the game, meaning that the idea of a sequel to Bayonetta would become very desirable.
But it is here when things took an even stranger turn.
3 years would pass since the original game launched, and hope and anticipation would continue to build, even though Hideki Kamiya had previously stated that he didn't believe he would ever work on a sequel. To everyone's surprise, on the 13th of September 2012, Bayonetta 2 would finally be revealed. However, the news wasn't what the franchise's core fans wanted or expected. The game would be announced during a Nintendo Direct, confirming that the long-awaited follow-up is a Nintendo Wii U exclusive. While Nintendo home consoles are hugely popular today, with the Nintendo Switch shaping up to be the best-selling game console of all time, a decade ago Nintendo's reputation was drastically different. In contrast to the Nintendo Switch, the Wii U, if you don't include the Virtual Boy, was Nintendo's worst-selling home console ever, meaning that the majority of Bayonetta's audience would have no possible way to play the second game in the series unless they chose to invest their hard-earned money in Nintendo's failing hardware. To say people were annoyed would be an understatement.
But given how unpopular the Wii U was in comparison to its contemporaries, what happened here?
In a series of tweets at a much later date, Kamiya would reveal that when it came to Bayonetta 2, Platinum Games initially received funds from Sega to develop the game and release it on multiple platforms. But sadly, circumstances would change and Sega would choose to halt the project. While Sega didn't want to continue investing in the game's development, Nintendo decided to step in and begin funding the project. This meant that the rights to Bayonetta 2 belonged to Nintendo and Sega, and as rights owners, Nintendo would decide that the game should be a Wii U exclusive. This business deal would also result in the original Bayonetta being ported to the Wii U. Kamiya states that he is hugely grateful to Nintendo for stepping in and ensuring Bayonetta 2, and to Sega for allowing Nintendo to use the Bayonetta IP. So, despite many fans being outraged that they couldn't play this game on Sony or Xbox systems, without the Wii U there would never have been a Bayonetta 2 to begin with. Platinum Games producer Atsushi Inaba, responding to complaints by fans of the original game, stated that Bayonetta 2 would not exist if Nintendo had not partnered with the developer to make the game. Sega would remain the consultant on the project and work commenced on the title, with its development being based on feedback the staff received from the original Bayonetta. This would allow them to bring various improvements to the sequel.
So what were these improvements, you may ask?
Noticeable changes relate to the movement of enemies. In the first game, for example, there was a single enemy movement when Bayonetta struck them, while in Bayonetta 2 they have different animations depending on the direction of Bayonetta's attack. As we progressed through time, a further development trailer appeared in the January 2013 Nintendo Direct, confirming that development was going smoothly. A playable demo would later surface at E3 of that same year, with a multiplayer mode being announced, along with the option of a touch-based control scheme and the confirmation that the game will support off-TV play. More would be revealed in a Nintendo Direct in February 2014, including the inclusion of new weapons for Bayonetta and the use of the new youth character as being playable. By October 2014, the game and the Wii U port of the first game were released worldwide. Amusingly, this also saw the introduction of Nintendo costumes in the game, resulting in some uncharacteristic adultish imagery involving the Big N. Speaking of bizarre moves, Nintendo would even partner up with Playboy to make the game with them, producing a photo shoot involving one of their playmates cosplaying as Bayonetta.
Unbelievable, Jeff!
Bayonetta 2 would essentially end up carrying on the action-style gameplay of its predecessor, but new gameplay elements would mix things up, including the introduction of Umbran climaxes. These techniques strengthen Bayonetta's attacks and combos with extra wicked weaves and infernal dragon summons for a short period. Like its predecessor, the game would become another critical success, with Edge magazine describing the title as a riotous, spectacular work of the highest order of camp. GameSpot reviewer Mark Walton said the game will be remembered as an absolute classic and awarded it a perfect 10 out of 10. Destructoid also rated it a 10 out of 10, with them declaring it as one of the finest action games of all time.
Not bad for a title that was maligned for being a Wii U exclusive.
Sales, though, would be predictably much lower than with the first game that showed up for sale on much more popular hardware, but that wasn't enough to disappoint hardcore owners of the Wii U. Speaking of the Wii U, Bayonetta's adventures on the hardware weren't over quite yet, as in a surprising twist, she was added as a DLC fighter you could add to Super Smash Bros. For both the Wii U and Nintendo 3DS. Again, this was pretty surprising at the time, as both the character and Bayonetta's themes are much more adult orientated than your average Nintendo game, so she was undoubtedly the more adult character who had shown up in Super Smash Bros. As Emperor Palpatine would say, it was a surprise to be sure, but a welcome one. As discussed earlier, while the Wii U was a console no one wanted, the Nintendo Switch, on the other hand, has become the game console everyone wanted. So, when Bayonetta 2 saw a re-release on such a platform in February 2018, it was not surprising that the second iteration of the game ended up selling much better than its predecessor, meaning more people than ever have now experienced the Bayonetta 2 magic. Considering that the Nintendo Switch is about to become the best-selling console of all time, Bayonetta 2 being a Nintendo exclusive was not the death knell for the franchise that some fans had predicted.
Which of course now brings us onto Bayonetta 3.
Hideki Kamiya has stated that it was decided from the start that the game would be developed using Nintendo's funding, with him confirming that without their help, there would be no Bayonetta 3. Bayonetta 3 would become a reality after it was announced by Nintendo in December 2017 during that year's The Game Awards, alongside Nintendo Switch versions of Bayonetta and Bayonetta 2, confirming the title as in development for the Switch in addition to Nintendo's involvement as its publisher. By April of the following year, Platinum Studio head Atsushi Inaba would speak to Eurogamer, stating that he believed that the third game would mark a turning point for the studio, mentioning that the game would be a linear core progression action game in a similar vein to its predecessors. Inaba was again interviewed during E3 2019, clarifying the game's status as going quite well. A first look at Bayonetta 3's gameplay was shown during a Nintendo Direct last September, with confirmation that the game will hit shelves in 2022. Here it would also be laid out that Yusuke Miyata was the game's director, while Hideki Kamiya has been functioning as the game's executive director. Miyata previously worked on the cancelled action role-playing video game set to see release on the Xbox One, known as Scalebound, with some mechanics for Bayonetta 3 being pinched and carried over to that title. A blog post on Platinum Games' website confirmed additional staff involved in the game, including cinematic supervisors Yuji Shimomura and Masaki Suzumura, and artist Mari Shimazaki reprising their respective roles from the previous two games. A launch date has since been confirmed that the game is coming out on the 28th of October 2022.
Well, I guess there's been nothing in the air but excitement for this one. Well, not quite.
Sadly, as is usual on the information superhighway, as exciting of a prospect as this game is, the ugly drama surrounding the game's development for the last month has continued to steal gaming news headlines. I did say that this was a controversial history. The heart of this controversy revolves around Helena Taylor, the woman who served as the voice actor for the first two Bayonetta games. In the past, Platinum Games told Game Informer that Helena would reprise her role for the third game. However, instead, she was replaced by Jennifer Hale. Platinum claimed that the change was due to various overlapping circumstances, meaning she could not reprise her role. 1 week after this happened, Helena released a set of emotional posts suggesting that Platinum Games' claims were not transparent. She would claim there was no conflicting schedule. Instead, she declined the work due to only being offered $4,000 for the performance, which she considered insulting. The franchise has made $450 million thus far, referring to the situation as legal but immoral. Furthermore, she has gone as far as to ask Bayonetta fans to boycott the third game, stating, "If you're someone who cares about people, who cares about the world around you, who cares about who gets hurt with these financial decisions, then I urge you to boycott this game." Fickle fans would begin turning on new voice actress Hale for accepting the role instead. Neither Platinum Games nor Nintendo would immediately respond to these tweets. Still, the outspoken Hideki Kamiya sent out a tweet that day stating, "Sad and deplorable about the attitude of untruth. That's what all I can tell now." The internet drama did not end there though, as 3 days later Bloomberg would report that Platinum Games offered to pay her $3,000 to $4,000 per session for at least 5 sessions, meaning the minimum she would have been paid for working on the game would have been $15,000. Bloomberg would report that their source claims negotiations fell apart after she requested a 6-figure fee and residuals for her work. Taylor has since claimed that the source the media have spoken with is lying, and she'd like to put the whole franchise in the rearview mirror and leave it behind.
What an absolute kerfuffle.
Later, new voice actress Jennifer Hale would tweet out, "There are lessons in this, so many lessons. Let's just be good to each other. Let's start there and sleep. Sleep nice." By the 21st of October, Platinum Games would finally step in, stating the situation, declaring their support for Jennifer Hale, and asking people to refrain from commenting on the ongoing situation. As of writing, this drama continues with this trivial story dominating headlines, but as they say, no publicity is bad publicity, and all this nonsense has more people talking about Bayonetta than ever before. Bayonetta is an incredible franchise with a storied history, delivering some of the finest gaming experiences this side of the 21st century. A lot of love, care and attention to detail has been put in to make this series so great. And the fact that these games have never been far from controversy adds to the crazy Bayonetta story. If you like this video, then make sure you subscribe, and if you want more controversy, check out my video on Osama bin Laden's secret video game collection. Thanks, bye!